How would you react if you heard that Elon Musk, the renewable energy and aerospace darling, publicly admitted to struggling with public speaking throughout his life? 2, in front of a live audience, Elon Musk unveiled Tesla's latest project, the Cybertruck. 3, what is the one thing that you took away from Musk's presentation? 4, Elon Musk is famous for 3 things: his entrepreneurial spirit, his spaceships, and smoking weed on the public podcast. 5, Elon Musk is a memorable man. Talk to your neighbors. There's no right or wrong in this, right? Everybody is going to do things a bit differently. 2 minutes. Go ahead. Okay. Okay, 30 more seconds. Okay, thank you. Now this will be a really good communication exercise that everybody in the room can hear, right? So you're going to have to use big voice. I've got my mic, you don't. So I'm interested to hear what you have to say, but I'm also interested to know that everybody in the room can also hear. So I might ask people if they are able to hear. So let's start with, and I may cold call a little bit. Sometimes I just point, right? I hope you don't want to answer, you don't have to, of course. But who would like to start in here? Which do you think is the strongest opening and why? Any brave souls here? Well, you had a good idea. I was just talking to you. So
we'll volunteer there.
Okay, we'll go to you after. Okay, so what was your? Can you speak in big voice? You're gonna have to get right to the back of the room. You might even want to stand up. Big voice. Thank you.
I think 4 is very intriguing, because when you think of Elon Musk, you don't first think of the time that he smoked weed. You would think of this
So it's a little bit unexpected, right? It's a dimension of Elon Musk that might not be the first thing you think of.
Yeah.
So unexpected, okay. And for you, yeah, big voice.
Yeah, I think the first one I most, and for other ones, either they are a bit too standard or they attract me from the content of the writing. For example, the fourth one is quite unexpected, but just regarding my personal it's too unexpected.
So number 1 is the one that you feel is the strongest?
Yeah, the strongest.
So what is it about number 1 that makes it strong?
Yeah, it tracks your mission, but it still stays on the topic of past how it's speaking. And it also touches on aerospace starting and renewable energy, which quite matches the topic. And it's quite complicated, I think.
Good, yeah. And it kind of shows a vulnerability, a weakness that Musk may have, that he has this worry about public speaking. And in fact, what we viewed was him speaking publicly. So it's an interesting kind of piece of knowledge about him. And it also then suggests that we're going to find out more about it as we piece goes on. Yeah, good. Just a couple more. Anybody? Any thoughts? No. Who's brave here? Yeah, go ahead.
Personally, I feel that sentence 4 needs a little bit of a fact check because like smoking weed on public podcast might be too like shopping for the general audience and stuff. Yeah.
Well, Shark, who is shocked by that statement that he smoked weed on the podcast? It's part of his legend, right? It's most of us kind of smile a little bit, but I get your point. That might be a little bit shocking. Yeah, go ahead. Quiet, please. Quiet. Thank you.
I think with the key differences between sentence 1 and sentence 4 is that sentence 4 is memorable, but for the sentence expected for the wrong reasons. It's not related to the message. As said in page 6, the unexpectedness of your message needs to be connected to the message itself, and I think one does that very well.
Okay. Nice point. Yeah. And what was that quotation we just saw? If you tell me 3 things, you don't tell me anything, right? So good observation. So here's a few of the thoughts I had on these. I thought the first one, I thought it was engaging and kind of relevant, given that we're assessing a public presentation that he's giving. And so it's a very relevant way of getting us focused on how he does it effectively or not so effectively. The second one, I felt is kind of a standard opening. Many say something like this. It's functional, but it's unmemorable. It lacks a kind of a strong core message. We don't really know what the purpose of the statement is beyond the fact that he unveiled the Cybertruck. So I would say take it a step further and create something that has a stronger core message. I like this. It creates a personal connection. It asks us, the audience, to be included, which is kind of a nice strategy. And certainly when you come to your oral presentations, that's something that you might consider. How do you engage your audience directly and immediately? It's kind of an important thing that you want to do. This, as some say, it's kind of concrete fun. It's definitely give you a slightly wicked story. I'm not sure. But as you said, maybe it's taking us in too many directions that aren't actually relevant to what we're wanting to do with this particular assignment. And then finally, how many of you thought 5 was a strong candidate? Some of you? Hands up. Some, maybe not some. I liked it. It's simple. It's certainly relevant to the assignment, and it sort of deserves proving. How's that going to then develop? So I'll walk through this myself. Here's 2 student statements on simple, and the first. Musk doesn't vary the lead of the presentation. He gets to the core of the reveal in his opening moments. It doesn't look like anything else. The single idea, the Cybertruck is unlike any other, is the selling point and is revisited throughout the presentation. So I thought it's good attention to the importance of not burying the lead, something that we all need to be conscious of in our communication, that our lead is visible and apparent. And it also draws attention to the core of the presentation, which is the statement, it doesn't look like anything else, which is kind of arguably his part of his core message. There's nothing else like it out there, right? And he keeps reinforcing that throughout the presentation. Yeah. This one here, Musk also utilizes simplicity to reach his audience. It's kind of a standard statement. It has no purposeful core message. So I would encourage the writer to push for something more concrete. The second sentence is better. Being simple while communicating is not a matter of dumbing down, but sharpening your idea to maximize the effect of everything you are communicating. So it's kind of a focused summary of simple and maybe a better opening sentence for the paragraph. And then the last statement, Musk has a core message for the audience. This truck is the best truck out there. Maybe that's the best way to begin the paragraph. Maybe that's really the core statement that the paragraph's going to try to prove and discuss. So I would say that's probably where you want to start, a stronger start. Now, this is the last thing that we'll look at, the last written. So I realize it's an eyeful, but I'd like us to consider this in a few different ways. First, I want to consider whether or not we think it's a well-organized summary and analysis. And then afterwards, we'll consider whether or not it's persuasive. So I'll just read it for you so we can kind of follow through the statement. Bear with me. The main to stick principle I think the Cybertruck presentation most fulfills is unexpectedness. Unexpectedness focuses on both getting and keeping the audience's attention. Between the hammer tests and the steel ball tests, Musk ensures that the presentation does not lose the audience's attention. The hammer test is memorable since it demonstrates the strength of the Cybertruck's chassis. However, the most memorable part of the presentation is when the steel ball test fails after seemingly working during the drop portion of the test. While this seems like it might ruin the presentation, Musk mentions that there is room for improvement after the test, leaving the audience to think about how it will be improved before launch. Besides keeping the audience's attention, this moment creates a knowledge gap for the audience, which should keep them interested in news regarding the truck launch. So there's the paragraph. So just talk with your neighbor just for a quick minute. Do you think this is a well-organized summary and analysis? Just see what you think. Just 30 more seconds, 30 more seconds.
This discussion is.
Okay, so thank you. So anyone have any quick thoughts on this? Any brave souls? Over here, right there. Good, thank you.
So I think the first sentence kind of gives it away. Why don't we put I think in the sentence to be more assertive?
Okay. So it needs to be more assertive. What about the overall organization of the ideas? Does it seem to kind of hang together? If you know, kind of having a simple core message means that you want some unity, you want to focus on one thing. Does the writer do a good job with that? Yeah.
Yeah, I think the paragraph could be a little bit more sticky and be a little more concise with language.
Okay.
But in terms of organization, they follow a pretty concrete path of first saying, oh, it's unexpected, what unexpectedness is, giving examples, and then going through each example. So I think it's well organized, but could improve on conciseness as well.
Okay, good observation. And I tend to agree with that it picks up an initial point, the main point for the paragraph, that the presentation, you know, that the principle that it fulfills is unexpectedness. And then it follows that with a summary or a definition of unexpected. And then it offers proof, it offers some evidence from Musk's presentation with the hammer test, the steel ball test, and he doesn't lose the audience's attention. And then there's some analysis of the evidence. He's not just letting the evidence just stand for itself. He's trying to explain sort of what makes that test memorable. Then provides some additional evidence that what's most memorable is when the steel ball test fails. And then he explains why that's memorable. And then at the end, he offers some further explanation of why it's memorable. So in my eyes there, it's well organized. There's a good balance between evidence and analysis. You know, we always want to know what you have to say, what your thoughts are. We don't just want you to point to what Musk does and let that stand for itself. So the writer's done a good job with that. But then when we get to this point about whether it's persuasive, is this a persuasive summary and analysis? And then you were saying, well, maybe not so much. Maybe it could be more concise. And anyone have any just observations on that? Any thoughts? Are you a believer? Does this make you a believer? Yeah.
I think it's been like too long. We explain too much stuff, but we got the lead got buried.
Okay. The lead got buried. Okay. Well, what do you think? What do you think of the first sentence? Is this a kind of core message that bears proving? Or is it a too general point that doesn't really get our best attention? Yeah.
Well, I think it's second message, it says the element is question, but it doesn't say why.
Okay.
In the first sentence,
Yeah.
I'm trying to get point for evidence.
Yeah.
But it's both on a high level, but it's not good.
And that's a good way of looking at this. Sometimes it's just taking it one step further. Why is it? What is it that, how does he do it? What makes it memorable? Or, excuse me, what makes it unexpected? So taking that one step further, and also if we look at it, does this paragraph actually prove that point? Does the writer try to prove that unexpectedness is the principle that the presentation will fulfill? No, doesn't even try to. Would have to compare it to other principles to make that point stick, right? To make that case. So my thought there in terms of its persuasiveness is that it lacks purpose, it lacks a purposeful core message, and as well the paragraph doesn't really go on to prove that. Now, what do you think? The next sentence we've already identified is sort of the summary, the definition of unexpected. What do you think? Is it a good summary, a good definition? Does it do enough? What do you think? Pick on you because it's close to me. Don't know? Any thoughts?
It's short.
It's short? Okay. Now, having read the text, okay, go ahead, yeah.
I think it's missing how unexpected get audience attention, because the whole idea, all the principles to make this is to get audience attention.
Should do that. It's about unexpected that makes it kind of different than the others. So it's kind of a very thin summary or definition, hard to work with, hard to do too much to make a really compelling and persuasive case. So I would agree with that. It's thin and could be said, I guess, about, as you say, about any of the different principles. Now the proof here, the evidence is reasonably persuasive. Yeah, he gets our attention with the hammer test, with the steel balls. So I would tend to say, yeah, that's pretty good evidence. And then what about the fourth, sentence 4, where he's explaining why the hammer test is memorable? That made good sense to you? Yeah.
No.
Okay, so why not?
Because, you know, the starting part has to be strong at all.
Yeah,
What makes it memorable is the way you show it.
that's right. The big sledgehammer blows, yeah. So I would agree. I would say the reasoning there is not really, wrong. The evidence of this is trustworthy. The additional evidence reinforces the main point. This idea that the steel ball test failing is certainly memorable. And then I thought the analysis at the end is more productive. You know, the writer says that while it seems like that might ruin the presentation, Musk mentions that there is room for improvement after the test, leaving the audience to think about how it will be improved. That's kind of nice thinking. I hadn't really thought of that myself. That's a kind of nice reasoning. And it's good here that the writer is including his own thoughts, right? Which is what we want. We want his analysis on this. And then finally, I thought the closing was productive analysis. That the moment creates a knowledge gap for the audience. It's kind of nice, it's kind of nice use of data stick and keeps them interested in news that will come regarding the truck launch. And one of the things that I noticed that a number of you had different ideas about was that when the windows smash, right? The ball bearing smashes. Some felt that it totally ruined the credibility of the presentation. Others felt that it kind of enhanced the credibility. And for those of you who can think back and remember, how many of you thought that once Franz throws the ball bearing, smashes window, credibility gone? How many thought that? How many thought that ultimately it kind of added, well, it certainly made the presentation memorable, but that it added credibility? Okay, so if it added credibility, how did it do so? If I could go to you.
Shows he's an honest guy, right?
Yeah.
Shows mistakes.
Which is what many of you thought, that it shows that the other two tests were not rigged, right? They were honest, and that he's not kind of super defensive about it, and you know, room for improvement. Kind of gave him credit, as you say, for his honesty. Yeah.
I'm not sure. Wouldn't that show that? Wouldn't the failure of that test, as opposed to adding credibility to the other test, really reduce the credibility of any of the tests that were not performed in person?
That were not performed in person?
For example, if you throw a ball bearing at the window and it breaks in person, and then they show you a video of them shooting the door and the door not to the car, it's really going to make you wonder if that door was actually.
Well, yeah, these are all good questions, right? You know, people had different feelings on that. Certainly for the live tests, I suppose we then tend to go, well, yeah, the live tests are all real, right? Because they didn't fail. And yeah, when the tug of war between the Ford F-150, kind of, is that all real, right? And should we believe? But that was an interesting point, because their unexpected was that it was unexpected to him as well, right? So it added a kind of a nice level of interest to the presentation, because he had to kind of deal with that unexpected little catastrophe. Good. So I thought the paragraph could be more persuasive, certainly, but it closes with some strength. I thought the final analysis, the final discussion is certainly stronger. So just a few quick takeaways. This was kind of recurring feedback. As I was kind of just alluding to, the unexpected makes Musk's presentation memorable, in part because some things were unexpected to Musk himself. Musk's use of physical demonstration makes the presentation particularly memorable. And that may seem like just a kind of a bit of a no-brainer, but it's definitely worth keeping in mind how much that's true. Doing all that demonstration is really what most people remember. Many of you felt that a bit more emotion would have made us care more. And many of you felt that he didn't really appeal to self-interest. The self-interest is most common kind of truck drivers. They're not necessarily interested in some of the things that he may have been showing. And as a speaker, maybe he lacks a sense of compassion, or some of you felt. I'd have to kind of think on that, but perhaps. And then as well, more stories. And he could have used stories. He could have used stories about Tesla. He could have referred to product development. He could have used that, leveraged that probably more effectively, so agreed. Good, so looking now to WD1, the graphics proposal. It is posted, so certainly you want to take a look at it. It's not due until March the 4th, but March the 4th is coming soon enough. And you'll find in your meetings this week with your CIs that they'll be asking you to start to bring some draft work for WD1 into the weekly meetings. So the introduction is kind of the purpose of the document. Here you're wanting to convince your reader, it's your CI in this case, that your team can develop a usable and responsive graphics interface for your map, for your geographic information system. And Professor Betts is going to be posting milestone 2 soon. Milestone 2 is about drawing maps. And so WD1 is your plan, your proposal for milestone 2. The state-of-the-art review, the second section of the document, we're going to ask you to identify 3 current GIS in different fields and analyze the usability and responsiveness of these. Could be good, could be bad. You may find that they're extremely effective. You may find they're not so effective in these 2 ways. So you don't necessarily need to be finding current GIS that are kind of super good. They might not be, in the end, turn out to be so useful for your purposes. Now we ask that you look at different fields so that you're not just looking at GIS that does street mapping. What other kinds of things do GIS do? They're you know, as we kind of say, they're pretty ubiquitous now, they put it everywhere. What uses do GIS have? Anybody? Yeah.
City planning for things like sewer or electrical lines.
Yeah, infrastructure, sewer, electrical line, good. Any other thoughts, any other uses that come to mind? Yeah.
Like when people want to take photographs of like star gazing, they would check for which cities like that's there.
Okay. Sorry, I missed the first part.
Like taking photographs of stars.
Stars. Okay, yeah. So meteorology, astronomy. Lots of meteorologists use this. Agriculture, health. Yeah. Mining. Yeah. Good. So you'll see as you start to do a little bit of research into GIS, it's kind of everywhere, right? So we want you to become familiar with GIS from a few different fields, see what kinds of features you might be able to use in your own proposal, things that they do that make their GIS usable, responsive. So that's probably the first stop for your work in WD1. Also, we want you to include discussion on 2 scholarly papers. One likely discussing usability, the other responsiveness, so you've got some credibility. So when you talk about usability, you talk about responsiveness, we understand that you understand these terms in a larger context, in a kind of a scholarly context, and you're able to include that. Your proposal, you plan to make a usable, responsive mapping tool that will be supported by the state-of-the-art review, those 3 GIS that you have studied. There's a quick testing section, how you'll verify the usability and responsiveness of your proposed system. So we can talk about that in more detail later. And then the conclusion is kind of key point takeaway from the document. And so this is, of course, a team document, so you're going to have to coordinate with each other and how to build this. On Monday next week, you'll have the opportunity to meet one of the librarians from the Engineering and Computer Science Library. She's going to come in and give you some guidance on how to conduct research, particularly for the scholarly reports that you're going to want to include. And you'll see now in Quarkus that we've already got a library resources page up. So I'm just taking a screenshot here so you can see it. And this is probably too small to see. I don't have my glasses, but you'll probably want to start with research on the state-of-the-art review, on finding GIS in these different fields that you can then analyze. That's probably the first thing you want to do. And I did a sample search. This was a few years ago. And I started with Google, and I started just putting in the search terms Geographic Information System, and it gave me lots. There were more than 4 million hits, and the top ones looked pretty relevant, but too much to consider. So I narrowed the search, applying some search terms, usability and speed. And the top hits now show more GIS applications, so that was useful for me. I then put in a time range, which then of course limited the search considerably. And it came down to 100,000 results, and all of them then current. You'll see in the library resources that we also give a little bit of information about using Google Scholar. Do some of you use Google Scholar? How many use Google Scholar? Some? Okay, yeah, good. It's easy to connect to Google Scholar here through the University of Toronto Library. You just sign into your Google account. If you don't have a Google account, create one. And then you go to settings, and you open the library links, and then you create access to the link to the University of Toronto, and checking those 2 boxes. And then you'll see that you've got access, get it, UTL. These are all available to you then through University of Toronto Library. And so here I did the same kind of search in Google Scholar, Geographic Information System usability. And this is what I the first hits came up, and I opened the first entry at the top, and I downloaded the PDF so I could take a look at it and look through the abstract. Saw that it's a GIS. The article will present an example of a GIS and environment for visualization of health statistics. This may not be of interest to your team, but as you're choosing different GIS, you'll be interested to see what's happening in different fields, how they're being used. So now I did the same search in Google, and this is what I came up with. The first hit took me back to Google Scholar. The second one I had to pay for. The third one was a shortened PDF version. And the fourth was another paid for article, or entry to the article. So good reason to me to consider Google Scholar as a better place to be looking for scholarly work. Now, some of the things you can do once you're in Google Scholar is that you can, not only simply check the articles, but you can find out more about, for instance, the author's publication history. So you could open up the Brown, just see what Michael Brown has been doing, and maybe you'll find that there's a number of very relevant articles there in your search. So it's a way of continuing the search, looking, refining a little bit. I think the librarian will, on Monday, we'll talk a little bit about the H index and how to, maybe use that to help you decide whether you're looking at authoritative sources or not. And as well, you can view the citation history. So there you can see all of the articles that cite the original source. Okay, these are ways to kind of build your search quickly. When you find a good article, one that looks good, you can do this kind of searching. Search the citation history, excuse me, search the author publication history, see if there's useful additional articles and publications there. And here, articles that cite the original source, you can then look at the articles written by those people. So these are kind of, I think, productive ways to, kind of create a focused search. Any questions on WD1? On any of this? On Monday, the librarian will be walking you through a few of the different databases. I think probably Scopus or Compendex, so you can start to see how to do searches in some of the other databases that may be even more productive than Google Scholar. Yeah.
Does something like Google Maps or Apple Maps count as a GIS software?
Well, Google Maps is certainly a GIS, yeah. But if you're going to use Google Maps, certainly can. That's your street mapping GIS. Then the other two should be from different fields. Yeah. Ron, would you add anything just to like first steps in doing this kind of research, searching?
I gotta use my big voice, see if you guys can hear me.
Yeah.
So, like at the start of any project where you're building something, you want to do background research. So that's what I'm always asking you, because otherwise you need to feel. Sometimes I'll be on a master's or PhD student, and they've worked for 2 or 4 years on some research, and they miss some key background. So it's like, well, no, there's a better way to do this. Everybody in the room knows it except the person presenting. That's awkward. So you want to spend some time doing this research. It's useful to start. Sometimes you can find a more generic introduction. So survey papers can be good. You often see papers with the name survey in their title, often highly cited. Google Scholar is useful for seeing how many people cited this paper, probably influential. And a survey paper usually gets more of an introduction. A lot of scholarly works that are for experts. Start in the new field, you're not yet an expert. So reading survey papers can help. I find Google Scholar a really nice resource because it's easy to use. The Google search engine is very good. And the fact that I can see how many times this paper has been cited, I can look at the paper, I can see what they reference. So if I like the paper, I look at what their references are, because I might go read some of them. And the fact that Google Scholar also shows you reference this paper lets me go. It's something you used to be able to do. You can actually go forward in time, right? You can read the references on the paper and go backward in time. The citations in Google Scholar let you go forward. Anyway, so that.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Once I started to use Google Scholar, I found that it was really an easy way to do a pretty comprehensive search. And as you say, you can check out the citation history. You can see the number of citations. You can follow the citation history, and then you can make some quick decisions on whether or not you feel that this is the right area to be in before you commit too much time. It's a good way to do some surveying before you make your final choices. So I will leave it at that for today. So I'm glad that everybody's safe, and we found a place to do this afternoon, and hopefully next week we're where we should be.